This is Gordon Stewart, and this is episode 1 of Tales from Wyrd, Scotland. Overlooking Galashiels in the Scottish borders, Buckholm Tower stands, ruined, looking a little forlorn, utterly empty, utterly quiet. Inhabited into the 20th century, the tower could yet be saved, but a feeling of neglect and the passing of time almost overwhelms. The roof has gone, the floors have gone, the windows stand gaunt and empty. But it was not always so. Built in 1582, the tower was typical of the fortified castles that can be found throughout the borderlands. But this one is still more or less complete to the very top, which makes its abandonment all the more melancholy. The home of the Pringles of Buckholm, lairds in these parts, Buckholm is famed for its hauntings more than its architecture. The story of why goes quite far back. One of these lairds, James Pringle, has become as notorious in death as he was, by all accounts, in life. The story is well known locally, but you might not have heard it further away. And, as Christmas is a time for tales of ghosts, here it is. James Pringle lived in the second half of the 17th century and was feared for his temper, his cruelty and his debauchery. His wife and children would flee from him after years of torment, and no woman was said to be safe in Buckholm Tower. His reputation for evil was known for miles and miles around, and it was said that his favourite pastime was hunting Covenanters, religious rebels in the eyes of the government, trailing them with his great hounds as other lairds would hunt fox or deer. Laddup Moor was a secret meeting place of the Covenanters, these earnest religious dissenters, anxious to worship far from the eyes of the state and authority. Pringle knew this, and he led a band of government troops here, keen to capture these Covenanting troublemakers. The Covenanters heard of the attack and fled, but one old man, Geordie Elliot, once a servant in the house of Buckholm, had fallen badly from his horse as they fled. His son, William, stayed by the side of his gravely ill father, hoping for help. Help would not arrive. The Elliots were captured by the troops, and the local laird Pringle was keen to execute them there and then. The captain of the troops, however, hoped to force details of their Covenanting friends from the men to find out who their fellow rebels were. So he asked Pringle to hold the two men in his prison-like cellar in Buckholm Tower overnight. Pringle agreed. So back to Buckholm Tower the unfortunate men were taken. The arched stone vault of the cellar was dark save for one tallow candle flickering in the corner. Only straw covered the earthen floor that the Elliots were thrown onto. The old man, by now very seriously ill, perhaps not long for this earth. With the Elliots held fast in his cellar, the laird, James Pringle, climbed the turnpike staircase to his chamber above, and ate and drank alone. He filled his brandy cup several times over and over, emptying it quickly. Perhaps this elevated his sense of power. Perhaps his natural cruelty grew stronger by the cupful. Sometime later, he descended the turnpike staircase, pushing past those few servants who dared to stay in his employ. They were gathered outside the cellar door, listening to the cries for mercy coming from within. The Elliots were desperate to be freed, and William, of course, feared for the life of his gravely ill father. But perhaps Pringle wanted to show his prisoners exactly how powerful he was. He entered the cellar, locking the door behind him, his terrified servants listening as sounds of a skirmish were followed by 2 different, agonised screams. Pringle emerged some time later, locking the cellar behind him, a chilling smile on his face. He returned to his chamber above and to his brandy bottle. Some time later still, a servant disturbed his drunken slumber. A visitor had arrived at the gate of Buckholm Tower. Old Isabel Elliot, the wife of old Geordie Elliot, had arrived to beg the Laird of Buckholm for mercy. With a leer, Pringle led the old woman to the cellar. Throwing open the cellar door, Pringle ushered Isabel inside with a mocking, courteous flourish. A heartbreaking scream was all Isabel could give when she saw both her husband and her son hanging from the meat hooks in the cellar ceiling. Their bodies impaled like the carcass of pigs which would normally hang there. Sobbing, she fell to the floor, where Pringle spat the insult, "Witch!" at her. Slowly rising up, Isabel cursed the Laird of Buckholm, wishing him harm because of his hateful crimes. And from that day, a change was perceived in Pringle of Buckholm. He claimed he had become accursed, haunted by packs of terrible hounds following him wherever he went. Servants would find him in his study, alerted by his screams, fighting off great dogs that no one else could see or hear. He claimed ghostly dogs would snap at his heels as he ferociously rode his horse back to Buckholm Tower, begging his servants, fight off these unseen hounds. And then, not so very long afterwards, James Pringle of Buckholm died, it is said, in agony. Writhing in pain, the Laird departed this life, mourned by none. 1 year later, as is so often the case, on the anniversary of Pringle's death, a ghostly figure was seen running up the winding path to Buckholm Tower, pursued by a glowing pack of hellish hounds. Loud banging noises were heard, as if the devil himself was banging on the great wooden door of the castle, desperate to enter. Terrifying screams were heard from the castle courtyard, but when the door was opened, there was nobody there. And a little later, screams were heard coming from the very cellar the Elliots had perished within. Could it be that Pringle was being forced to reenact his terrible crimes as punishment? Every June, on the anniversary of his death, terrifying screams have been heard near Buckholm Tower, ghostly hounds observed in the hills nearby, and, more dreadful again, heavy loud knocks from the now deserted cellar. It's said that a minister from Galashiels once performed an exorcism to rid Buckholm from these terrible torments. Whether it worked or not, who knows? Now, however, Buckholm Tower stands empty and alone, left to its ghosts.
That was Gordon Stewart reading a story adapted from his blog, which can be found at borderlandscotland.wordpress.com. This episode was recorded, produced and radiophonically designed by me, Nick Cole-Hamilton. This is a You Better Run Media production. Join us again soon for more tales from Wyrd, Scotland.